Imagine a world where men stepped up and answered God's call to reach their full potential. Imagine a world where men put their faith and trust in God unwaveringly and without qualification. Imagine a world where men lived out God's purpose for them in everything they do. It's Not My Credit to Take explores the awe and wonder of how God shows up in the lives of strong, principled Christian men from all walks of life. Get ready to laugh, to cry, and to be transformed. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Slover, faithful husband, loving father, loyal friend, and unapologetically Christian. Welcome to the It's Not My Credit to Take podcast.
Darnell, what is going on?
Hey, my guy, how things going?
Everything's going really, really well. For the listeners, my guest today is Darnell Spruill. I first met Darnell during a LinkedIn professional networking call last summer, the summer of 2022, and we've stayed in touch ever since. He's a skilled and dedicated financial services professional offering valuable experience in pricing analytics, card service business functions, corporate finance management, including forecasting, trend analysis and statistical data, project management, and employee training. Darnell has over 10 years of corporate experience and is solutions-oriented and has developed into a leader countless people willingly follow. And he also, as a side hustle, has 2 properties that he rents out through Airbnb. And I couldn't be happier to call Darnell my friend. Darnell, welcome to the It's Not My Credit to Take podcast.
Glad to be here.
One of the first notes I wrote in preparing for this episode was the initial call we scheduled after the LinkedIn call. Now, that was the first ever LinkedIn networking call I'd ever been a part of, and you and I connected and we got on each other's calendar and I completely flaked. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh my gosh. And anyone that knows me knows that when moments like that happen, I just beat the heck out of myself, for half a day. I cannot stand when that happens. And I'm so grateful that you were so gracious in scheduling a second call.
Yeah, I knew you were genuine intent. You could tell when people are intentional. So I was like, yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure I had that meeting with you. Some people, you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna call them back and ask to do it again.
Right. I'm sure glad you did. And we've met roughly, well, in the fall we met roughly every other week, and now we're kind of on a monthly rhythm, just given our various obligations. And I can tell you, without equivocation, that I genuinely look forward to touching base with you. You have such a peaceful spirit about you that kind of settles this personality and temperament down.
I'm glad, and your energy helps me out. So we help each other out.
We're the proverbial yin and yang, I suppose.
Yes,
so
sir.
Tell us about your background and how you ended up where you are in your life.
Okay, so background, my dad, he was military. So I grew up in what they call the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia. And I'm the youngest son. I have 3 brothers, but I'm a twin. So fun fact, I don't know if I told Ed this, but I have a fraternal twin.
You have not told me that, Darnell.
I didn't tell you that?
I feel cheated. You know what? We can't be friends anymore. Let's just end the call now.
Oh, nah, you can't do that to me. But sorry for not telling you, but my twin is a foot taller than me.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, so 5'8", he's 6'8". So they get upright in military. My dad, he was the highest rank and enlisted in the Air Force. So imagine how life was. Very structured, very strict. And I hated it. And my dad was a minister on the side for a church. So again, not only was he really strict because of the military, but biblical principles as well. So yeah, growing up as a child, it was at that time, it wasn't fun. But then when you grow older, you're like, you know what? That's the best upbringing I could have ever had. So we were in Maryland, and then when he retired, we moved to Virginia, and I stayed there. I ended up going to college out there, Old Dominion University. So long story short, I wanted to be in business, always knew I wanted to do stuff in business. And I graduated in the wonderful year of 2008. I was finding my way. I wanted to do management. I wanted to do accounting. And then finance came. I said, I want to be on Wall Street, like everyone on Wall Street, like the Wolf of Wall Street, but the good guy. So I graduated, and you know what? There was a recession. So everyone that got laid off, I'm going against people who had 5, 10, 20 years of experience. I had no chance. So in hindsight, I got this finance degree. I always wanted to do something in corporate finance and do something in finance where I'm a leader because, as you know, not a lot of people look like me in those positions. So I could use my platform to be a leader and make change. But, you know, it's easy to get discouraged. So I graduated, 2007, 2008? It wasn't until 2014 I got my first big break. So that'll tell you about patience and knowing there's a season for everything and a reason for everything. A lot of people don't say they'll question God. You don't question. He knows what he's doing. He knows you better than yourself. So he knew I was responsible in terms of paying my bills and stuff, but I wasn't responsible in terms of being a leader. And he knew that. So that's why it took that path for me to wait until 2014 to get this opportunity. And since then, I'm working, finance, that's my passion, but as well as the youth have always been my passion as well. So mainly all youth, but definitely young males. So this ties together because I moved to Atlanta, took a leap of faith, actually. I've been in Virginia, Maryland all my life. I got laid off, actually, for my job. I worked at Capital One. I was working there ever since college. I actually had an internship there. Got offered a job right when I finished my internship, but then that 2008 situation happened when they're like, you know what, we can't give it to you, but you could keep your job though, but you can't get the corporate job. So I stayed there and got complacent, stayed there for like 5, 6 years. And sometimes God will tell you you need to move and make moves, and you don't do it. He'll make you make moves. So what happened in my case, you know, I was complacent 6 years afterwards. I was working there at 9, but 6 years after graduation, and the layoff happened. So to put salt in the wound, to give you a bigger picture, I was working at a call center. So working at a call center, they had a little section for like the jobs you need a degree for, or if you want to call corporate jobs. So I had one of those jobs at the time because I had my MBA and everything. I was well qualified. When a layoff occurred, they said, well, Darnell, your job, other departments do the same thing across the country. Because Capital One bought out the bank I was working for 2 years before that. At Capital One, you know, they're big. They already had people doing my job. So I said, well, you could go back on the phones and do collections. And mind you, collections you didn't even need a degree for, and it was a lower pay. So in my mind, all my colleagues saying, Darnell, you're going to stay, right? I'm thinking, you know what? I got bigger dreams. I've always wanted to go in finance, and I always wanted to do it, but I can't do it here. I tried networking with people throughout the organization to get my role. Nothing fell through. So I actually called one of my friends that live in Atlanta that worked with me there and went to college with me. He said, hey, I'll get you a job in Atlanta, but you got to move. Mind you, I never made a leap of faith where this is a major move. No family, ever. So, you know, I said, you know what? Yeah, I'll do it. So I did the whole application process. And then they called me after I went down to Atlanta, did an interview. They called me and said, you know what? We're going to offer you the job. You know, at that point, I just was going through the motions. I was thinking, you know, I'm just going through the motions. I'll get to stay in Virginia. When they offered me a job, I couldn't say no, right? So I said, yeah, but my heart sunk down to my belly. I said, what am I doing here? So I took the job and made that leap of faith, and it's been the best change in my life. Not just financially, not just professionally. I built a lot of great relationships. I'm in organizations that give back. So and that's God, it goes back to what I said about God. That's him pushing me. He made me do that. So sometimes, you know, it happens a lot. I know you can relate to it too. You get very complacent and then something happens or you have to make a change. So that's how I got to where I'm now.
Isn't it fascinating that whenever we wrestle with God, we always seemingly lose? Even in those moments where we feel like we win, where he's like, okay, have it your way, and then he lets us endure whatever pain accompanies our decision, versus having just acknowledge, hey, look, I don't stand a chance going up against him. I may as well go that direction.
All the time, all the time. We're hard-headed. We're hard-headed human beings. It goes back to Adam. We've always been hard-headed.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So you grew up in a Christian home. And your mom is a person of deep faith too, correct?
Yes. Funny thing, her father, my grandfather, was a pastor. He has his own church. I didn't tell you that, but yeah.
So you've got that pastoral lineage, through several generations. Growing up in that environment and living the life that you've led, have you ever gone through a season where your faith in God ever wavered?
Of course. I mean, we never really talked about it, but think about being a minister's child first. It's a lot of pressure, and you go into a school. When I was in Maryland, it was very sheltered because you're in a military base. Virginia, we saw the real America, the good, bad, and ugly. And then that's when you wanted peer pressure, you want to fit in. And always hearing about God all the time. We were in church 3 to 5 times a week sometimes, Ed, where we were in the music ministry, the drama ministry, Bible study. And going through that, you get rebellious. You get rebellious, and you kind of like they keep thinking it's overboard. And because that's all they talked about. If we hit our arm on a table and hurt, then you pray over it. That's how intense it was. That's how intense it was. In order to eat dinner, we had to memorize Bible verse and tell them what it meant every single night. So yeah, of course, at a certain time you stray away because it's just the spirit. It's something that's going to force on you all the time. You sometimes go to the left instead of what you were taught. And of course, I did it. In middle school, I hung with the wrong people. I actually got in trouble one time with the law. Again, it was stealing, but I still got in trouble. And I'll never forget, because I've always been the goody two-shoes son. So when they put me in jail as a teenager and they called my parents, I got a similar name to my twin. His name Darren. So they called my parents and say, hey, your son Darnell, he's in jail. They said, not Darnell, you mean Darren. They're like, oh, Darnell's in jail. They did not believe it until they pulled up and saw me, and they were so shocked. But it's stuff like that I started hitting with the wrong crowd. You get rebellious, and it's like you're doing it intentionally, but it's still subconscious too that you're doing it. So that's I went off the path with the college. And I did good in college, but at the same token, I strayed away from reading the word, my principles. I did a lot of time, not with bad people, because, in college, there's a lot of good people, but partying, not caring about church at all. But it wasn't until I started getting back to the word that my life started changing for the better in terms of me getting opportunities and me meeting the right people I want in my circle of influence. And something that really stood out to me, people preach, say all these Bible scriptures, and really religious. I'm not. What really stood out to the Bible to me that made me get back to it and maybe read it every day to this day is that it's really a pathway to life. Whether you think of relationships, me and you, or marriage, finances, how to do your finances, what companion of friends to keep. If you are a leader, you want to have a wise counsel. All that is taught, just in Proverbs alone, all that is taught. So I started reading and being more intentional, because I'm like, not only is it, quote unquote, what the world makes it seem like religious, but it is the guide to your life to be successful in whatever you do.
Yeah, I have a friend. I haven't seen him in a couple of years because he relocated down to Tucson. One Sunday morning, he and I were going to play tennis, and his wife was at best lukewarm about Jesus and attending church. And he grew up in a Christian home. and his name's Tim. And I asked him, I'm like, let's say none of it's true. Let's say nothing, the Bible it's just a compilation of stories and allegories. Isn't it the best guidebook you probably ever written, even if it's not true, the guidebook to life? And taking it further, wouldn't Jesus be a leader you would willingly follow anyway if he wasn't the Son of God? And he turned to me and he's like, I've never thought of it that way. Because whenever you take the dogmatism out of it and you look at it, to your point, as a guidebook for life, it's absolutely genius. And then you bring the fact that it's the actual word, that's awe-inspiring.
I agree 100%. And I think that's the method you should try to teach people who are not believers. But just read it for your God, for your life. And then they make that into a habit to start changing their lifestyle where they're going to end up being a Christian. Yeah. It might not happen that first day, but eventually will.
So when you talk about God, what do you talk about?
Well, I talk about with my friends in general and just people, interactions.
Yeah. So let me be a little bit more specific. So when you're with your family and friends, or when you're with coworkers, how do you navigate that space? Because that can get a little awkward.
Oh yes.
Go ahead.
So to answer your question, with family is easy because it's really Christian based. You could talk about it. But with coworkers and people who may be unbelievers, I never try to cram it down anyone's throat. That's the worst thing you can do. When I was on my forbidden path, the people I did not talk to was those people who try to cram it down your throat. What I'll do is genuine too. I'll just be myself and be that warm person. People confide in you. I know I have a gift from God. And where people confide in you and trust you, that's where you can drop jewels on them about the Bible. Darnell, why you like this and like that? Well, I'll say a quote from Proverbs or a quote from Matthew. And I'll say, yeah, this is why I follow. Now, wow, that's a great quote. What's that verse again? And it happens a lot. I always have people who go through tough times. And whenever I hear people who go through tough times and very negative, I make it a purpose to always be the opposite. Never, even if I don't have bad days, but let's say I could have a rough day or whatever, I will never tell them that because I know where they're at in life. And I keep being positive and keep speaking life. Eventually, I'm gonna be like, hold up. Why are you so happy all the time? I get that. It's like, hey, can I have a call with you because I'm going through a lot? Can you work with me to get me out of this rut? And that's exactly how people see Jesus. That's what he did. He was not that guy that was cramming it down people's throats. So I'll never get the notion of why people do that because that will push people away. He stayed with the commoners. When he was there and with the people gambling and drunkards and everything like that, he was with the people being regular, and he would tell them parables so they could relate to him. He broke stuff down, and that's how you have to deal with people. You have to treat them like human beings and be your organic self, and people will see that through you.
It reminds me of the John Maxwell leadership quote that people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yes, and
what's ironic is coming across individuals that feel like they need to open the fire hose and the proverbial dogmatic Bible thumpers. What's ironic is that they believe they're doing good. They genuinely believe that, despite the fact that it's somewhat misguided. And speaking of things that are crammed down our throats, particularly in contemporary culture, this whole idea of toxic masculinity or an acceptance that men, particularly young men, are allowed to be listless and aimless in life. I mean, clearly culture is dictating certain terms that's leading to a lot of confusion. I've mentioned this multiple times so far on this podcast that in the fall semester, I had 5 or 6 male students come up to me after class asking me, what does it mean to be a man? So if I were to pose that question to you, Darnell, from your perspective, what does it mean to be a man? How would you answer that?
I would answer it. I'm going to say a preface first. One, I'm a firm believer God made man and woman for a reason, because there's different roles. He knows that certain things we can do that a woman can't do, and vice versa. So going to society, like you said, now, it seems like they're trying to make everything the same, but weakening the standards of a man. So for me, I believe a man, it's not about being macho and being buff and being intimidating, but a man should exemplify leadership, brave. And it's okay to be vulnerable. People say, but they push it too much where it's okay to be weak. There's a difference. It's okay to be vulnerable, but you also have to know when you have to stand in the gap and stand strong in tough situations, because people are looking up to you. It's okay to be respected. And again, you have to be boisterous or anything like that. But as men, we need to know that it's okay to take the lead. That's the main that we're missing nowadays, and be brave.
So how would you differentiate between vulnerability and weakness? And I ask this because the timing could not be more on point. I just this week wrote the episode 13 of my other podcast. You can see I'm repping the shirt here on the video. For the listeners, you can check this out on YouTube if you're Spotify and Apple listeners. It's actually called Vulnerability, Not Weakness. So I know how I internalize the difference. How do you internalize the difference between vulnerability and weakness?
Vulnerable would be a situation where a difficult situation has occurred. It's okay to, let's say, show emotion for that moment. You use a loved one, or you're doing a bid for a job and you lose it. It's okay to let your guard down a little bit, and that we could have done things differently, and feel not defeated, but feel like, hey, this is a learning opportunity. Weakness for me, and it can be something different for other people, is when you give up and quit and show no fight. A big example of this would be, I'm not going to say names because I never would try to throw people under the bus, but what we're seeing going on in, let's say, basketball right now, NBA, you've seen a couple players, they went through tough times and they ultimately quit. What example are you showing? Think about kids, youth. They look up to entertainers and sports athletes more than anyone. What example are you showing to them? That if you don't like it, or someone gets on your nerve, or you don't get along with your coach, you quit? And for them, it would be getting along with their parents or teacher. That's a sign of weakness instead of being vulnerable.
Got it. The idea of quitting, to me, and I want to get your take on this too, the idea of quitting to me is boring. And the reason I find it completely boring is, let me add another qualifier: boring and uninteresting. And the reason I find it both boring and uninteresting is that everybody can do it, and not everyone seemingly can take the path of more resistance and push into and through the struggle and adversity in their life. And of course, the path of least resistance is just quitting and giving up. What's your take on that perspective?
Quitting is boring, and your character is really defined by going through obstacles and hard times. Well, I believe Frederick Douglass, right? He said, without struggle, there's no progress. So how are you going to progress of being more wise, being more of a great person in your craft, being more of a leader? How are you going to get there if you quit? You're not. And this society, it's been like that forever, Ed, but I feel like now there's a whole bunch of followers and no leaders, because it takes a lot to be a leader. You're going to have to go through tough times, uncompromising times. You have to be the oddball. No one wants to be that now because of this cancel culture. But order.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, two things come to mind. The first is pushing back against cancel culture, pushing back against society being anti-men. And when I say that, that's not entirely accurate. What we're dealing with is we have a small percentage of the population that is extraordinarily loud and vocal and has mainstream media to use as a bullhorn, where the vast majority of people, at least those that I've spoken with, and I appreciate that I'm somewhat insulated in certain environments, there's such an appetite for this conversation, especially in the face of cancel culture. So when I shared the idea for "It's Not My Credit to Take," what was your initial reaction?
I was excited because this conversation has to be had right now. You see, on social media, something you touched on a little bit, most of those platforms are ran by people who want that agenda to be pushed. That's something that people are having a conversation. Most of the people out there, they're identified with that narrative. Mm-hmm. So you're right. Most people are not like that, but you wouldn't know it if you watch social media.
That's right.
So you have this platform, you talk to me, told me about talking about it. It's a healthy discussion because it's not about demeaning nobody, but it's about saying it's okay to still be a man or be masculine and what masculinity really means. Because it's like it's a bad word now to say it. And I'm like, where'd that come from?
Right. I was having a conversation last night with my wife, and we were talking about "It's Not My Credit to Take," and one of the vehicles of getting the message out on this is the podcast. I have no idea today where it's going to go, through other forms of media or different types of events or whatever. But I let her know, like, darling, I want you to know I'm fully prepared to be called every ist in the book if this thing actually becomes more mainstream. And that's an interesting space because so many people, particularly men in society, are terrified of the label up to being canceled. And yet there's still a recognition that we need to help build character in men, particularly young men, so they answer God's call of their potential. Now, you're not a parent yet, and I know you aspire to be a parent. In terms of, let's say you had a son, in terms of helping him answer the call of God's potential, where would you start with him?
My biggest thing with my son would be live to your truth. It's very temptation. We grew up through it where you want to be like everyone else. And just imagine, I don't have a son yet. By the time let's have a kid next year, 13 years, you see where we are now with masculinity and cancel culture. Just imagine where we'll be 13 years. It's going to be vital that I'm an active participant in his life. It's showing him it's okay to go against the grain because he's not going to be in the majority. He's not. By the time he's 13, the majority is going to be definitely against masculinity. So my thing is to lead by example of how to be Christ-like. That's the key thing, because a lot of people who do get canceled, they don't lead by. If you lead by Christ and people try to cancel you, what makes them? That's a real difficult conversation to have. But if I'm speaking positive, if I'm showing love, but I still want to be the man of the household, I still want to lead, I still want to be brave, I still don't want to quit, I still not going to follow what everyone else is doing, but I still show love and I still do the right thing and follow the laws, it's going to be real hard to debate. They're going to look silly. And I think where a lot of people get in trouble is that they come at people going against masculinity, but they come at it, I'm not going to say hateful, but not Christ-like, where it can be contentious and controversial.
Gotcha. So you referenced being an active participant in your son's life, if you're blessed to have a son. You're also actively involved in the lives of young men. Can you talk
Yes.
about, because I know you serve as a mentor, can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in that space?
You asked a $1,000 question. I'm glad you asked this because so one of my passions, as you heard earlier, is tap into the lives of youth. And just me being an African American male, I see the not presence of fathers in these child's lives, definitely young men. So what occurs is that they're getting raised mainly by women, and that whole masculinity thing, the masculinities situation comes up. Because of course, a man isn't going to know how to be a father. A woman isn't going to know how to be a father and show the son, hey, this is how you should be as a man. So when they grow up, your biggest role models are your parents. You ever notice that, the older you get, you start doing things just like your parents? You ever notice
Regrettably.
that?
I don't know if I don't know if I'm overly proud of that fact, Darnell, but you're right. That's what kind of the order of things.
and you hear it all the time. And just think about if you only had women influences, what you going to do? What you going to do when it's time for you to take charge to protect the house, or to make crucial decisions of buying a house, or making an investment, or taking a career, or knowing when to lead at a job, or a church, or whatever. A lot of these young men do not have it. So as a result, you ever see them emulating men in the street, which is a roadway to jail, or a lot of them, use the masculinity touch and are very submissive and aren't leaders. So I say, how can I be a positive influence into the young men's life? So there's an organization called the Achievement Institute here in Atlanta. And you asked, one of the questions you asked was, how does God work? And like, in what times has he shown up? He showed up because I went to a networking event a few years ago, met this guy there, do not even remember the conversation. But I know we added each other on LinkedIn. Then all of a sudden I see he's loading a volunteer organization that taps into young Black males. So I reached out to him. I knew I met him from somewhere. I said, hey, I would love to join him. And then when he interviewed me, made sure my background check was good. And I've been a part of the organization ever since. The cool thing about this organization that we meet up a couple times a month, we teach them life principles. A lot of these guys will never, ever know how to do investment, how to run their own business. Golfing, which is a great tool for networking. It's something you could do as your leisure activity when you get older. And we teach them, we take them out every single year in the wilderness where they don't have their phone services don't work, so they don't have their phones out. And they're just out in the wilderness and interacting with each other. We teach them about coding. All these skills that, again, I wish I was taught that when I was in high school. A lot of stuff we take for granted, but they're not getting shown. And then they're having access to us. They have a phone number. They can reach out to us whenever they want. Email. It's an open door, and the parents are very encouraging.
During those conversations that you have with those young men, do you talk about scripture? Do you talk about Jesus and the role he's played in your life? And if so, are they interested and welcoming of that content?
Yes, so I do definitely talk about the word. The reason why I got to where I am now, I told them, hey, I'm raised from ministers. I know a lot about the word. I'm intentional. I read it. If you read it every single day, make it a habit, in your subconscious, it's going to be your subconscious, and your actions will lead to what the word tells you. And I tell them, and the funny thing about a lot of these youth, you're going to laugh. You think they're not listening. They're very quiet. They shake their head, but they're soaking it all in. And you see it. I know one kid, he was the shyest kid ever. I told him, sometimes you got to take a leap of faith and put yourself out there. And I told him about when God used, I want to say Paul, where he persecuted Jesus. I said, you never know who he's going to use. And I told him that. And now he's reaching all his dreams. He does drama. He leads the whole drama program for his school. I'm like, this is the same kid that was nervous and wouldn't say a word in any meeting. So you never know your influence on any of these children. And another kid, I was telling them about setting himself up for the future. It talks about Proverbs where the harvest, you do a harvest in summer and spring. So then in the winter, it'll go full forward while everyone else that's been lazy, don't have any food and are, poor, you'll be self-sufficient. I told him, I said, well, you're in school now. You got to get ahead of your exams, your ACTs. I said, you should do it now. So let's say you don't get your desired result. You could go back and take it. You wait till the last second. You only could take it once. If it's not a good score, you may not get to the college you want to go to. That very next week, he said, Darnell, Mr. Darnell, I took my ACT. I signed up for it. And I didn't know, I'm just talking to him. So for him to take that feedback, it shows being a man how important it is to be a part of these kids' lives.
Is it fair to say in those moments, and I assume I know the answer because I've had the opportunity to mentor young men in higher education. For me, it's equally gratifying whenever they actually take actionable steps based on the suggestions and recommendations we make. They're certainly gratified for having done that, and I'm equally gratified when they tell me that. Is that the same with you?
It's the best feeling in the world. Not having a son and seeing them, they're like my sons, and seeing them grow and make the right choices is a beautiful thing. Because I've seen the other side too, where they don't do the right thing. And that's hurtful because you're like, man, because, you just want them to win. You want them to have a better life than what you had.
Yeah, one of the challenges to being a teacher, coach, mentor, and parent is that, and I hesitated on the parent piece because we have our children in front of us, up until 18, the lion's share of the time. But in those other roles, teacher, mentor, coach, it's really cool to know that we have a little bit of impact in their life, but it's one of those gosh darn it moments because we realize that we only have a little bit of positive impact in their life, and we want way more because we have so much to offer, and so many reasons why we are in many ways, we're as mentors and coaches and teachers, we're never fulfilled. But I want to come back because you talk about how even in those moments where they don't appear to be listening, that they are. Do you ever find those moments somewhat demotivating where you don't want to continue having that next conversation? Because I see it all the time with my students, and certainly I see it now almost every day with my teenagers, albeit they're teenage girls. What keeps driving you to have those next conversations?
So when I first was a part of the organization, Ed, I lied to you not. I thought 99.9% of anything I told them when they were out the other. There will be meetings where, it's participation and we ain't trying to force them to talk, but then we start saying, hey, what do you think about this topic? And I was thinking, man, it came in my mind, but I knew it wasn't true. I'm like, am I wasting my time? I don't think any of these kids care. But it wasn't until it goes back to practice and developing habits. They keep going to it. Eventually, it's going to pull through. It's not going to be everybody. But my dream is if I can save one of these kids' life, I did my job. Because I can save the kid's life that made secure for cancer. He wouldn't have if I wasn't part of his life. God used me. I did my role.
Yeah. In your professional life, because I can clearly tell you're passionate about being in the lives of these young people. In your professional life, one of your passions there is to add value to whatever organization that you work with or partner with or even work for. What's your motivation for wanting to add value where the let me think how I want to say that. Where most of the tangible benefit goes to the company, and certainly you get benefit working for them. In contrast, actually working one-on-one, where the person you're mentoring gets the benefit, but you can actually see that happening firsthand. So what really drives you to want to add a ton of value to the organizations with which you work?
It's twofold. One is you only live once. So think about it. Most of your time during your adult life, if you work a corporate job, is being spent at work and sleep. Not with family, not vacationing. So most of my time is there, and then you die, right? You retire or you die. That's the natural cost for most people, right? I don't want to die and say I didn't put it all on the table. I want to go 1,000% in anything I do. And by doing that, you're going to spark other people to go hard too. And this twofold, the second part is by having that drive and that passion, people won't forget that. And I wanted to tell you about this, but I didn't know you were going to ask this question. So the opportunity I have now, the highest level I've ever had in my professional career, it started when I was an analyst. I was working 9 years ago, and there was a guy that was in business development. And then he went over and became the vice president of operations. But I always would help him with stuff. And to me, I'm just doing my job in excellence. I didn't even think what he would think about me. So I left his job, and this is for anyone listening to this podcast. It matters of putting your best foot forward, even if you don't like the job. So he left. I got another opportunity. I was in this job for 1 year. This job, I think I met you. Obviously, I met you. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn. He said, Darnell, what's your number? I need to talk to you. I'm thinking, man, he's about to get laid off or something. You going to ask me for a job? So I said, let me go ahead and give him a call. I gave him a ring. He said, hey, we're looking to fill this role here. I think you're the perfect fit.
Wow.
Off of relationships. You always put your best foot forward because people will recommend you and they'll remember you.
Whenever I go to edit this episode, I'm gonna have a duplicate copy of everything you just said, and I'm going to share it with my students, because we talk about it, and young people, they hear us, and if they find us credible, they'll believe us. But having that firsthand testimony is absolutely beneficial for that. So I appreciate you sharing that. As far as personally and professionally, or even spiritually, what's next for you?
I could touch on all three. So professionally, I do want to end up being a CFO. That's always been a dream of mine. And it's not even for monetary gains. It's a lack in how to lead properly, having compassion for people, not having to cuss people out and being the mean guy when you come in the office. Oh, that's a CFO, let's hide. If they could see someone they could just walk up to and be human with them, but still push for results and hold people accountable, that's what needs to be seen. And it goes back to my personal life, the organization I'm in. I'm going to be a straight shooter on this, Ed, when I tell you this. I've been in corporate America 9 years. I'm in meetings with millionaires, leaders, people depending on making millions of dollars of acquisitions. I'm the only Black man every single meeting. Maybe one time in 10 years, I've seen someone that looked like me. So my passion, I see these youth, I'm like, you could have a bigger dream than to be a basketball player or a rapper. There is a need. People want laws passed for equality and everything. Do you ever stop to think who's pushing those laws? It's C-suite people or corporations lobbying to congressmen. And Congress doesn't hear their voice and then pass the laws. So now I'm saying that people want change and want a better world, better America. There needs to be more people who look at me at the table.
Agreed.
So I see me getting there. Not only am I changing the way leadership is and making an organization more powerful and not fearful, but I'm helping others instead of them playing basketball and selling dope. And it's okay to get education. You can be cool and be a CFO or in corporate. So and then the last thing is settle down. You know, I'm single right now, but I'm in the prime. I'm loving this. Again, I'm in no rush. But you know, it end up settling down with somebody who's driven as well, looking to make a change, do something bigger than ourselves. That's what life is all about.
That's outstanding. Well, you and I both know God plays chess, and I'm positive he's moving pieces around to put that person in front of you in the not too distant future. One of the things that I've gotten into a habit of so far in the first 11 now episodes of this podcast is putting my guests on the spot just to end our time together with a prayer. Would you be open to saying a prayer?
Of course I would. Of course I would. Whenever you're ready.
Take it away.
Okay, so Father in heaven, thank you for having the time for me to fellowship with Ed. I pray that you could use us as vessels to change someone's life, someone who may be on the pathway with Christ but struggling, or just need to hear this word. A lot of times we think we're doing great, but there's something missing. I pray that whatever conversation Ed or I had can touch somebody and change their lives for the better. And I also pray that you work through us as well. Mainly Ed, he got this platform where it's a lot of people could see with the society, the conversation we had, it can be tough. And it can be hard for him with this cancel culture. I pray that you can build a fence around him so it can be not only prosperous, but it can change lives and change the narrative that's going on in society right now. I pray for any other guests that will come on this podcast so that they can not only spread their light and change lives, but they can spread the word as well. So more people can listen to a much needed conversation. And I pray for Ed. I know he's doing a lot of big things and making a lot of different life decisions right now. Pray that you continue to guide him when it gets tough out there, when he feels discouraged. You can let him know that you're right there. It goes back to our conversation that Ed and I had earlier of being patient and we're stubborn. We want to do our own way, but have us listen to you more. It took me 6 years to listen to you. And since let's lower it to maybe a year or maybe a few months. And all in all, thank you, Lord, for having this fellowship today. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Darnell, thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation. Lots of words of wisdom and insightful thoughts. I very much appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
You're welcome. God bless.
You too. Have a great weekend.
You can contact the show at itsnotmycredittotake.com. We'd love to hear from you. God bless.